Are you looking for a game that you can run with your kids, whether you are a parent looking for ways to connect with your kids and maybe teach some lessons along the way through play, or if you're a teacher or therapist looking for something to kind of lead a group of kids through? Today we're reviewing Adventuring Family. The designers of this book, Nicholas and Radu, I will put their full names here. I would attempt to pronounce them, but I feel like I would not pronounce them correctly. That's a thing that I have recently learned is common with people with dyslexia, so yes. But they reached out, and so the creators of this book reached out and asked if we'd be interested in reviewing this. Adventuring Family was designed to help kids specifically build social and psycho-emotional skills. One of the designers of the book, Nikos, was a educator of young adults, and he found that a lot of them were missing these social skills. And so he teamed up with Radu, who is a clinical child psychologist, to create this game and work together on this idea of learning through play. Also during COVID, Nikos came to really appreciate the togetherness of family and friend time, so wanted to create a game that not only taught kids some of these social skills, but also was a great opportunity for families to get together and game and do something together that didn't involve screens. This book is broken down into 3 sections. The first part is character creation and kind of how to play the game. Then it goes into the actual campaign that the book has, as well as at the very end, there is a section of some general advice, as well as how to create adventures and continue the game past the campaign. This is a game that's going to feel very familiar to folks who have played existing fantasy RPGs such as D&D, but the mechanics have been modified a little bit to make it a little bit more accessible to a younger audience, as well as to introduce some mechanics to help deal with some maybe social anxiety or learning decision making, learning to accept failure. So one of the main mechanic changes that you will notice is that instead of using multiple different sided dice, so D20, D10, D6, this game just uses D6, and you roll multiples of D6. I think this is really great because it simplifies the roll mechanic, especially for younger kids. You're not trying to learn which dice is which. You just know, okay, I either roll 1 die or 2 die. However many dice you roll, it's always going to be the same sided die. They also include a mechanic that allows you to not roll dice at all. If dice rolling is going to provide a little bit too much of the leaving things up to chance element for your kids, depending on the age, or it adds a little bit too much complication, instead you can just take basically the average of the die roll. So if it's if you're only rolling 1 die, you would say, okay, that's a 3. If it's 2 dice, it's a 6. This also results in a much more clear, you can do this or you can't do this, which I think, especially for some younger kids or kids who might struggle a little bit with that, fear of, am I going to succeed? It makes it a little bit clearer. Now, the book does give you kind of an introductory section that talks about how to use this book. It gives an overview of a number of different kind of mental conditions that kids may be dealing with, from autism, dyslexia, also to dealing with divorce or bullying. Not only mental disorders, but also these societal challenges that can create these mental conditions. Also, it is kind of suggested that the parent or therapist be the game master, but it does say that, hey, the game master role could be something that's very helpful for a kid to step into, especially somebody who wants to practice gathering and collecting their thoughts, exploring their creativity, and some leadership. Now, this book does talk a lot about using the adventures kind of as therapy or ways to deal with things that are going on in kids' own life, and perhaps especially as families talk about it. I'm not going to really touch on the therapy aspect. I'm not a trained mental health professional. I do appreciate that one of the people who created the book is, so I trust their expertise. But as a parent, I can definitely lean into the, dealing with difficult topics and talking about them through play. Even with a 3-year-old, we have times where we play out little scenarios with her toys, and that has sometimes helped her process something better than just flat out talking about it. I like that the artwork in here is very simple, but very clear. There's not a whole lot. Most of it is in the character creation section, and I like that all of the characters are depicted as kids, and it is clear, like, the characters that you're playing, the player characters are kids. They are starting out as adventurers. They've found this family heirloom, and that what gives them their class abilities. So not only is it being able to see yourself in the artwork, but also see yourself in the character for kids who are playing this game. My 3-year-old even enjoyed looking at the artwork and talking about who the different characters were, and like, oh, she was very insistent that the wizard was not a wizard, but in fact a witch. And once you get into the actual adventure, it becomes clear a lot of the kind of challenges the player characters are up against are similar to real world challenges. There is some combat, but a lot of it is more of the, okay, how do we creative problem solve together? Okay, there's some conflict between two people. How do we deal with this? How do we move past this conflict that's not just running in, hacking, and slashing? No adventurers die. Kids can't die. The adventurers can't die. I always appreciate that in games that are designed for kids. As well as the combat in this system is set up so that if your adventurers attack, like combat attack a normal person, there are consequences. They might go to jail. Something bad is going to happen. That's not really what they're supposed to do. The combat that does happen is when you realize that somebody has been overcome by a shadow. The shadows kind of help represent the various struggles that somebody might be dealing with, and they are kind of the bad things. And so the adventurers can attack these shadows, and when they're in combat with somebody who's overcome with shadows, the person does not take any damage, just the shadow does. So I think that's a nice way of, like, not teaching kids, like, we solve our problems by physical violence. But instead, we solve our problems by talking and problem solving and working together. Additionally, there is a great mechanic of if your players are working together, it lowers the DC. Always happy to see that, to encourage collaboration and cooperation, especially with kids. There is a crystal tiers mechanic that rewards creatively describing what the player characters are doing. This mechanic, I think there might have been like a typo or two in the paragraph explaining this mechanic. It wasn't super clear to me, but the idea was not like, oh, you don't get an immediate reward, but you get this crystal tier that you can then turn in to get a reward or clue to a larger storyline. It's also, the crystal tiers are used for a rewind mechanic. So if all of the adventurers fall unconscious, you can rewind and kind of go back to and let them realize the error of their mistakes. It also says, like, this rewind mechanic can be used at other times as a great opportunity for kids who might have this, like, fear of failing, and that kind of creating perhaps like a decision paralysis of, like, okay, we can rewind and go back and try it again. This idea of, like, it's okay to fail and go back and learn from your mistakes. Another way to reward creativity is that there is a inspiration dice mechanic, and this is something that the game master can just kind of give out, and it adds a extra dice to that roll. It is not something that, like, the players get to hold on to a dice and add it whenever, but it is a reward for in that moment. And I like that because I think especially some younger kids, there is that instant, like, I got the reward, and because I'm approaching this problem in a creative way, I get to have a greater chance of success. It's not just this kind of thing that's like, cool, great, I got this, now I get to hold on to it and will probably forget. But it is an immediate thing. And if you are using the no dice mechanic, it just automatically makes that roll the maximum number you could have gotten had you been rolling dice. So a single-sided roll goes from a 3 to a 6. The book provides a really nice variety of puzzles. There are kind of the classic like trap puzzles, but there are also some of the classic like the wolf, the chicken, and like a bag of grain that you have to get across a river, and as well as ideas of like using crossword puzzles or Sudoku puzzles, incorporating homework. There's a incorporating homework mechanic that is like a guild assistance that you can kind of get bonuses for completing your homework, and that helps you in game. I also like that there are 2 fun mechanics in here for creating dungeons. It does say like you can just go and find a dungeon and use that, but you can also use post-it notes or a Rubik's Cube to get your players involved. The post-it notes is you write out all the different rooms and flip them over, mix them up into post-it notes, and then the players get to flip over them and kind of build the dungeon as they go. And the Rubik's Cube is you let the players kind of mess up the side of the Rubik's Cube and pick one side, and then each color coordinates to a kind of room. So you, as the game master, can kind of prep the different kinds of rooms in advance, but still let the players perhaps choose how many different kinds if you're going the Rubik's Cube method, or for the post-it note method, like just the order. They have a little bit more agency within the dungeon. This is a magic system, and it has the traditional, like, there's the arcane magic, there's divine magic, and then there's nature magic. All of it feels very familiar to any kind of fantasy RPG fan, and there's a good variety of spells, but not an overwhelming amount that go from 1 to 3 tiers. The beginning of the book introduces the idea of Session 0, and there is a complete guide to what a Session 0 could include. Love to see that. A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Tucker. If you enjoy our videos, becoming a patron is the best way to directly support us. So head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. Okay, let's get back to the review. Okay, so let's talk about the campaign that's in here. And this is not going to be your kind of traditional campaign module where you have everything all written, all like the little description boxes and all of the character sheets and everything. Instead, you have a campaign overview that kind of talks through like, here's the overall course of the campaign, and then it goes into a breakdown of each session, and each session does not necessarily have a whole lot of information on it. It's much more bullet pointed of here are the things that kind of should get accomplished within this session, like they go to the castle and discover that the king and queen are not there, and then what do they end up doing next? And there's a little kind of brief description down below. I think this does allow you a little bit more flexibility as far as working in kind of whatever life lessons or social skills you want to introduce, because it opens up for the game master to kind of have it customized a little bit more to those kids. So if you have like, okay, they're going to run up against some kind of puzzle, you can figure out what is a good puzzle for this group of kids to deal with. If there's a conflict going on, you can kind of be a little bit more selective with what the conflict is. Now, it does have the stats for a couple of key NPCs and some key locations described, as well as kind of a little bit about the overall world, so you aren't completely starting from scratch on this. After the session breakdown, there are the stats for the NPCs and monsters. You have 6 different adversaries. 2 of them are kind of these low-level shadow creatures, and then 4 of them are kind of the big shadow bosses. The lower-level shadows are statted for level 1, but also include, like, here's how to bump them up, so that they can be higher level as the characters grow. And then finally, there is the tips and tricks, which has a nice mixture of gaming advice, and like how to craft the game and stuff like that, as well as how to deal with some of the social things at the table. Like, how do you deal with kids who are having difficulties grasping the rules or paying attention? How do you deal with a lack of understanding or somebody who has dyslexia or dyscalculia? And then at the very end is a very simple character sheet. I like that it uses symbols. I think this is very accessible for kids as well as everybody. And I particularly like that it has large spaces to write, which I think is a little bit more kid-friendly. Kids can sometimes have much bigger handwriting. Some of the spell area and description area is perhaps a little bit smaller, but that's something that maybe an adult could help fill in, and then the kind of other stats a younger kid could fill in on their own. Overall, I think this is a great way to introduce gaming to your kids. It feels like it would be very easy to start out with this kind of adventure, and even if you aren't necessarily looking to deal with any big topics, but just have a way to connect as a family. And then it does feel like it would transition pretty easily into something like D&D or Pathfinder, where you have a lot more options and a lot more complex rules, but you can kind of have had that understanding of not only just the understanding the mechanics of how to play a game, but also the social element of, yes, we're all sitting down together and we're going to play this game together and create these great stories with our imagination. So if you're looking to pick up your own copy of Adventuring Family, I'll make sure to put a link to it down in the description below. I'm glad that we now have this in our library, and am looking forward to when my kid's old enough that we can pull this out and be like, hey, you know how you keep looking at our D&D and Pathfinder and all of our other RPG books? Now you can play.